Sula by Toni Morrison, Chapter 5, 1923. The second strange thing was Hannah's coming into her mother's room with an empty bowl and a peck of Kentucky Wonders and saying, "Mama, did you ever love us?" She sang the words like a small child saying a piece at Easter, then knelt to spread a newspaper on the floor and set the basket on it. The bowl she tucked in the space between her legs. Ava, who was just sitting there fanning herself with a cardboard fan from Mr. Hodges' funeral parlor, listened to the silence that followed Hannah's words and then said, "Scat," to the Deweys, who were playing chain gang near the window. With the shoelaces of each of them tied to the laces of the others, they stumbled and tumbled out of Ava's room. "Now," Ava looked up across from her wagon at her daughter. "Give me that again, flat out to fit my head." "I mean, did you? When we were little?" Ava's hand moved snail-like down her thigh towards her stump, but stopped short of it to realign a pleat. "No, I don't reckon I did. Not the way you thinkin'." "Oh, well, I was just wondering." Hannah appeared to be through with the subject. An evil wonderin' if I ever heard one. Ava was not through. "I didn't mean nothing by it, Mama." "What you mean you didn't mean nothing by it? How you gone not meaning something by it?" Hannah pinched the tips off the Kentucky Wonders and snapped their long pods. What with the sound of the cracking and snapping and her swift-fingered movements, she seemed to be playing a complicated instrument. Ava watched her a moment and then said, You gone can them?" "No, they for tonight." Ava, "Thought you was gone can some." Hannah, "Uncle Paul ain't brought me none yet. A peck ain't enough to can. He said he got 2 bushels for me." Ava, triflin'. Hannah, "Oh, he'll right." Ava, "Sure, he'll right. Everybody all right except Mama. Mama the only one ain't all right 'cause she didn't love us." Aw, Mama. Aw, Mama. Aw, Mama. You settin' here with your healthy ass self and ask me, did I love you? Them big ol' eyes in your head would have been 2 holes full of maggots if I hadn't. "I didn't mean that, Mama. I know you fed us and all. I was talking about something else, like playing with us. Did you ever, play with us?" "Play? Wasn't nobody playing in 1895. Just 'cause you got it good now, you think it was always this good? 1895 was a killer, girl. Things was bad. Was dying like flies, stepping tall, ain't you? Uncle Paul gone bring me 2 bushels. Yeah, and they's a melon downstairs, ain't they?" Top of page 70. Ava's face was still asking her last question. Hannah looked into her mother's eyes. "But what about Plum? What do you kill Plum for, Mama?" It was a Wednesday in August, and the ice wagon was coming and coming. You could hear bits of the driver's song. Now Mrs. Jackson could be tipping down her porch steps. "Just a piece. Got a little old piece laying round in there you could spare?" And as he had since the time of the pigeons, the iceman would hand her a lump of ice, saying, "Watch it now, Mrs. Jackson. That straw'll tickle you pretty neck to death." Ava listened to the wagon coming and thought about what it must be like in the ice house. She leaned back a little and closed her eyes, trying to see the insides of the ice house. It was a dark, lovely picture in the heat until it reminded her of that winter night in the outhouse holding her baby in the dark, her fingers searching for the asshole and the last bit of lard scooped into the sides of the can, held deliberately on top of the middle finger, and the last bit of lard to keep from hurting him when she slid her fingers in, and all because she'd broken the slop jar and the rags had frozen. The last food staple in the house she had rammed up her baby's behind to keep from hurting him too much when she opened up the bowels to pull the stools out. He had been screaming fit to kill, but when she found his hole at last, she stuck her finger up it. The shock was so great he was suddenly quiet. Even now, on the hottest day anyone in Medallion can remember, a day so hot flies slept and cats were splaying their fur like quills, a day so hot pregnant wives leaned up against trees and cried, and women remembering their 3-month-olds hurt put ground grass in their lovers' food, and the men looked at the food and wondered if there was grass in it, and ate anyway because it was too hot to resist eating it, even on the hottest of days in the hot spell. Ava shivered from the biting cold and the stench of the outhouse. Top of page 71. Hannah was waiting, watching her mother's eyelids. When Ava spoke at last, it was with two voices, like two people were talking at the same time, saying the same thing, one a fraction of a second behind the other. He gave me such a time, looked like he didn't even want to be born. But he came on out. Boys is hard to bear. You wouldn't know that, but they is. It was such a carrying on to get him born and to keep him alive, just to keep his little heart beating and the little old lungs cleared, and looked when he came back from the war he wanted to get back in. After all that carrying, just getting him out and keeping him alive, he wanted to crawl in my womb, and well, I ain't got room no more if he could do it. There wasn't space for him in my womb, and he was crawling back, being helpless and thinking baby thoughts and dreaming baby dreams and messing up his pants again and smiling all the time. I had room enough in my heart, but not in my womb, not no more. I birthed him once. I couldn't do it again. He was growed, a big old thing. God have mercy, I couldn't birth him twice. I'd be laying here at night, and he'd be downstairs in the room, but when I closed my eyes, I'd see him, 6 feet tall, smiling and crawling up the stairs quiet-like, so I wouldn't hear, and opening the door soft so I wouldn't hear, and he'd be creeping to bed, trying to spread my legs, trying to get back up in my womb. So you see over here, Mom's just explaining how he needed so much attention, he needed so much care, and she uses this figurative language to say that he wanted to be back in her womb. He wanted all of that affection that she just couldn't offer him. Top of page 72. He was a man, girl, a big old growed man. I didn't have that much room. I kept on dreaming it, and I knowed it was true. One night it wouldn't be no dream. It'd be true, and I would have done it. Would have let him if I'd had the room, but a big man can't be a baby all wrapped up inside his mama no more. He'd suffocate. I did everything I could to make him leave me and go on and live and be a man, but he wouldn't, and I had to keep him out, so I just thought of a way he could die like a man, not all scrunched up in my womb, but like a man. Ava couldn't see Hannah clearly for the tear, but she looked up at her anyway and said, by way of apology or explanation, or perhaps just by way of neatness, but I held him close first, real close, sweet plum, my baby boy. Long after Hannah turned and walked out of the room, Ava continued to call his name with her fingers lined up and pleats in her dress. Hannah went off to the kitchen, her old man slippers plopping down the stairs and over the hardwood floors. She turned the spigot on, letting water break up the tight knots of Kentucky Wonders and float them to the top of the bowl. She swirled them about while her fingers poured the water off and repeated the process. Each time the green tube rose to the surface, she felt elated and collected whole handfuls at a time to drop in 2s or 3s back into the water. Through the window over the sink, she could see the Deweys still playing chain gang, their ankles bound one to the other. They struggled back to their feet, and tried to walk single file. Hen strutted by, with one suspicious eye to the Deweys, another on the brick fireplace where the sheets and mason jars were boiled. Top of page 73. Only the Deweys could play in the heat. Hannah put the Kentucky Wonders over the fire, and struck by a sudden sleepiness, she went off to lie down in the front room. It was even hotter there, for the windows were shut to keep out the sunlight. Hannah straightened the shawl that draped in the couch and lay down. She dreamed of a wedding and red bridal gown until Sula came in and woke her. But before the second strange thing, there had been the wind, which was first. The very night before the day Hannah had asked Ava if she'd ever loved them, the wind tore over the hills, rattling roofs and loosening doors. Everything shook, and although the people were frightened, they thought it meant rain and welcomed it. Windows fell out and trees lost arms. People waited up half the night for the first crack of lightning. Some had even uncovered barrels to catch the rainwater, which they loved to drink and cook in. They waited in vain for no lightning, no thunder, no rain to come. No rain came. The wind just swept through, took what dampness there was out in the air, messed up the yards, and went on. The hills at the bottom, as always, protected the valley part of the town where the white people lived. And the next morning, all the people were grateful because there was a drier heat. So they set about their work early, for it was canning time. And who knew but what the wind would come back this time with the cooling rain. The men who worked in the valley got up at 4:30 in the morning and looked at the sky where the sun was already rising like a hot white. They beat the brims of their hats against their legs before putting them on and trudged down the road like the old promise nobody wanted kept. Top of page 74. On Thursday, when Hannah brought Ava her friend tomatoes and soft scrambled eggs with the white left out for good luck, she mentioned her dream of the wedding and the red dress. Neither one bothered to look it up, for they both knew the number was 522. Ava said she'd play it when Mr. Buckland Reed came by. Later, she remembered it was the third strange thing. She had thought it was odd even then, but the red in her dream confused her, but she wasn't certain that it was third or not because Sula was acting up, fretting the Deweys and meddling the newly married couple. Because she was 13, everyone had supposed her nature was coming down, but it was hard to put up with her sulking irritation. The birthmark over her eye was getting darker and looked more and more like a stem in a rose. She was dropping things and eating food that belonged to the newly married couple and started to worrying everyone about the Deweys needed a bath and she was going to give it to them. The Deweys, who went wild at the thought of water, were crying and shuddering all over the house like colts. We ain't got to, do we? Do we got to? What she says, it ain't Saturday. They even woke up Tarbaby, who came out of the room to look at them, and then left the house in search of music. Hannah ignored them and kept on bringing mason jars out of the cellar and washing them. Ava banged on the floor with her stick, but nobody came. By noon it was quiet. The Deweys had escaped. Sula was either in her room or gone off somewhere. The newly married couple, energized by their morning lovemaking, had gone to look for a day's work, happily certain that they would find none. Top of page 75. The air all over Bottom got heavy with peeled fruit and boiling vegetables, fresh corn, tomatoes, string beans, melon rinds. The women, the children, and old men who had no jobs were putting up for a winter they understood so well. Peaches were stuffed in jars, and black cherries, later when they got cooler, they would put up jellies and preserves. The greedy canned as many as 42 a day, even though some of them, like Mrs. Jackson, who ate ice, had jars from 1920. Before she trundled her wagons over the dresser to get her comb, Ava looked at the window and saw Hannah bending to light the yard fire. And that was the fifth or fourth, if you don't count Sula's craziness, strange thing. She couldn't find her comb. Nobody moved stuff in Ava's room except to clean, and then they put everything right back. But Ava couldn't find it anywhere. One hand pulling her braids loose, the other searching the dress drawers. She had just begun to get irritated when she felt it in her blouse drawer. Then she trundled back to the window to catch a breeze if one took a mind to come by, while she combed her hair. She rolled up the window, and it was then she saw Hannah burning. The flames from the yard fire were licking the blue cotton dress, making her dance. Ava knew there was a time for nothing in this world other than the time it took to get there and cover her daughter's body with her own. She lifted her heavy frame up on a good leg, and with a fist and arm smashed the window pane. Using her stump as support on the window sill, her good leg as a lever, she threw herself out of the window. Top of page 76. Cut and bleeding, she clawed the air, trying to aim her body towards the flaming, dancing figure. She missed and came crashing down some 12 feet from Hannah's smoke. Stunned but still conscious, Ava dragged herself towards her firstborn, but Hannah, her senses lost, went flying out of the yard, gesturing and bobbing like a sprung jack-in-the-box. Mr. and Mrs. Suggs, who had set up their canning apparatus in the front yard, saw her running, dancing towards them. They whispered, "Jesus, Jesus," and together hoisted up their tub of water, in which tight red tomatoes floated, and threw it on the smoke and flame-bound woman. The water dipped out the flames, but it also made steam, which seared to sealing all that was left of the beautiful Hannah piece. She lay there on the wooden sidewalk planks, twitching lightly among the smashed tomatoes, her face a mask of agony, so intense that for years the people gathered round would shake their heads at the recollection of it. Somebody covered her legs with a shirt. A woman unwrapped her head rag and placed it on Hannah's shoulder. Someone else ran to Dick's Fresh Food and Sundries to call the ambulance. The rest stood there as helpless as sunflowers leaning on a fence. The Deweys came and stepped on the tomatoes, their eyes raked with wonder. 2 cats sidled through the legs of the crowd, sniffing the burnt flesh. The vomiting of a young girl finally broke the profound silence and caused the women to talk to each other and to God. In the midst of calling Jesus, they heard the hollow clang of the ambulance bell, struggling up the hill, but not the "help me, y'all" that the dying woman whispered. Top of page 77. Then somebody remembered to go and see about Ava. They found her in her stomach by the forsythia bushes, calling Hannah's name and dragging her body through the sweet peas and clover that that grew under the forsythia by the side of the house. Mother and daughter were placed on stretchers and carried to the ambulance. Ava was wide awake. The blood from her face cuts filled her eyes so she could not see, could only smell the familiar odor of cooked flesh. Hannah died on the way to the hospital, or so they said. In any case, she had already begun to bubble and blister so badly the coffin had to be kept close to the funeral, and the woman who washed the body and dressed it for death wept for her burned hair and wrinkled breasts as though they themselves had been her lovers. When Ava got to the hospital, they put her stretcher on the floor, so preoccupied with the hot and bubbling flesh of the other. Some of them had never seen so extreme a burn case before. They forgot Ava, who would have bled to death except old Wiley Fields, the orderly, saw blood staining his just mopped floors and went to find out where it was from. Recognizing Ava at once, he shouted to a nurse who came to see if the bloody one-legged black woman was dead or alive. From then on, Willie boasted that he had saved Ava's life, an indisputable fact which she herself admitted, for which she had cursed him every day for 37 years thereafter, and would have cursed him for the rest of her life, except by then she was already 90 years old and forgot things. Lying in the colored ward of the hospital, which was a screened corner of a larger ward, Ava mused over the perfection of the judgment against her. Top of page 78. She remembered the wedding dream and recalled the wedding always meant death, and the red gown, that was the fire, as she should have known. She remembered something else too, and try as she might to deny it, she knew that as she lay on the ground, trying to drag herself through the sweet pleasing clover to get to Hannah, she had seen Sula standing in the back porch just looking. When Ava, who was never one to hide the faults of her children, mentioned what she thought she had seen to a few friends, they said it was natural. Sula was probably struck dumb, as anybody would be, who saw their own mama burn up. Ava said yes, but inside she disagreed and remained convinced that Sula had watched Hannah burn, not because she was paralyzed, but because she was interested.